The office felt like a mausoleum by 8:30 p.m. Everyone who mattered, and everyone who pretended to matter, had gone home. I was just finishing up some grunt work, a 24-year-old junior analyst desperate to impress my way out of the cubicle farm. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the air conditioning and the distant street noise 2 floors below. I was ready to leave, ready to break the spell of the corporate cage. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the elevator, my mind already on the pizza I planned to order. That's when I saw the light on. Not the boss's office. Mr. Stern, the CEO, was famously meticulous about his exit, but in the glass-walled satellite office belonging to his personal secretary, Clara Vance. Clara was 42, maybe 3, impeccably dressed, and the undisputed gatekeeper of the company's highest secrets. She moved with a practiced, cool elegance, a complete contrast to the chaotic energy of the tech startup world we inhabited. She was untouchable, professional steel. Until tonight. I paused, about to tap the glass to say goodnight, when she looked up. Her eyes, usually guarded and assessing, were wide, almost desperate. She didn't wave me off. She crooked her finger in a sharp, urgent gesture. I knew immediately this wasn't about filing or scheduling. Stepping into Clara Vance's private space after hours, with the entire floor empty, felt like walking onto a tripwire. The risk was immediate and total. Any lingering security guard or cleaning crew member could end both our careers with a single phone call. I slid through the door. The moment it clicked shut, the silence felt absolute. She was sitting at her desk, but not working. There was a stack of sensitive files scattered around her keyboard. "Alex, thank God," she whispered, her voice tight, a surprising crack in her usual smooth delivery. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the mahogany, instantly collapsing the professional distance. "I need you to do something for me. Something that absolutely cannot be traced back to me." "What is it, Clara?" "Is Mr. Stern." "It's about Mr. Stern." She cut me off, her eyes blazing with urgency. "But you can't ask questions. You just have to trust me." She quickly rotated her massive monitor toward me. The screen was filled with spreadsheets, but one figure, circled in red, stood out. "This expense report," she murmured, her voice dropping to a level that forced me to step closer to hear her. "It has to look like it was filed under the old Q3 budget, not the Q4 account. The difference is minor, maybe 50,000, but the timing is critical." She stood up slowly, coming around the desk. She was close, closer than any manager had a right to be. The scent of her expensive perfume, something light and complex, was suddenly overwhelming in the small office. She pointed at the screen, and to demonstrate where I needed to change the code, she brought her hand up, resting it lightly on my shoulder. The professional touch was instantly undermined by the intense proximity and the illegal request. My heartbeat quickened, a physical response to both the danger and the sudden, charged intimacy. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin through my shirt. Her dark hair, usually pinned up severely, was loose, grazing my ear as she leaned in. "You have to manually override the timestamp," she breathed, her mouth inches from my ear. "It requires high-level access. You're the only one who still has access to the legacy portal since the upgrade." Her breath hitched slightly. The intensity was unbearable, making the simple act of looking at a spreadsheet feel like a prelude to something criminal and consuming. I couldn't move. Her presence was a physical wall, trapping me against the monitor. "If I do this, it's fraud," I finally managed, my voice rough. "If the auditors find this, I'm fired. You're fired. We both." "Exactly." She cut in, withdrawing her hand as swiftly as she had placed it, reasserting a frightening control. She moved back to her desk and opened a drawer, retrieving a small, metal USB drive. "Here is the explicit rule, Alex. And you will not survive this if you break it. You were not in this office after 8:15 p.m. You were never asked to look at this. If anyone, Stern, the security chief, your friend, the cleaner, asks, you are gone. And you must never, under any circumstances, admit to knowing this file exists." She handed me the USB drive. "This contains the script for the override. Run it. Delete the script. Then you leave." I was an accessory. The pressure of the lie was a hot weight in my stomach. Just as I plugged the USB into her computer, the external risk materialized. On the bottom left of her monitor, the small, tiled screen showing the feed from the hallway's security camera suddenly blinked. The camera, positioned perfectly to capture the door to her office, showed the security chief, Mr. Ramirez, walking slowly down the hallway with his clipboard, conducting the final, late-night visual sweep. He was methodical, looking into every glass-walled office. He was less than 30 seconds away. "Ramirez," she hissed, her eyes darting between me and the security feed. He always checks the admin wing last. He'll see your silhouette through the glass. She reached out and violently slammed the laptop shut. The sudden darkness was absolute, save for the emergency exit sign glowing faintly over the far door. Minicliff, hero is forced to return/stay. Get down, she commanded, her voice fierce. She shoved me roughly, pushing me below the level of the desk onto the carpet. I hit the floor hard, the USB still clutched in my hand. I heard the distinct, heavy squeak of Ramirez's shoes stopping right outside the door. He was checking the handle. In the pitch black under the desk, our bodies were forced together. I could feel her expensive leather skirt pressed against my arm, her stillness utterly magnetic and terrifying. She reached out in the darkness, not for the USB, but for my hand, finding my wrist and holding it with bone-deep pressure, a silent command for absolute silence. The outside threat was less than 3 feet away. Then, she quietly, slowly, pressed something cold and metallic into my palm. A key card. You can't leave the building right now. She breathed into the blackness, her voice so low it was almost vibrating against my skin. The override didn't run. You have to come back later. Use this key card on the freight elevator around 1 a.m. It bypasses the main security log. Now crawl out the service entrance and don't make a sound. She released my wrist. I was forced to commit to a midnight return, a complete bypass of the security system, and a deeper dive into her conspiracy. The silence of the midnight city felt different when I re-entered the corporate tower at 1:05 a.m. It was heavier, more charged. Using the key card Clara had slipped me, I accessed the freight elevator, which bypassed the main security log and spat me out onto the administrative floor. The air was colder here, sterile and still, illuminated only by emergency lights that cast long, blue shadows across the polished floor. I found Clara waiting not in her office, but outside the rarely used, windowless archival room, a small, cramped space deep in the center of the building. This room was known for its dense shelves of old, heavy files and its poor ventilation, the perfect, suffocatingly isolated spot for a conspiracy. She wore the same professional attire, but her composure was visibly strained, a thread of tension pulled tight across her elegant features. She opened the door with a quiet click, ushering me into the tight space where the only sound was the low, persistent whir of an old exhaust fan. The archival room was an instant reduction of our world. We were surrounded by floor-to-ceiling metal shelving packed with decades of company history, the air smelling strongly of ozone and brittle, decaying paper. The only light came from a weak desk lamp she'd set up on a small rolling cart. This was our new, more intimate stage, a space where we were physically forced to navigate each other with caution, or not at all. Our goal was simple: execute the override script on the isolated computer terminal located deep inside the room, then find the original physical expense receipts that Mark Stern was trying to bury. The tension immediately intensified when I realized the terminal was located behind a narrow, precarious stack of boxes. We need to clear this area first, Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the fan. She bent to lift a heavy box of old Q1 reports. I moved to help her, and for a prolonged moment, we were chest to back, shoulder to shoulder, trying to pivot the heavy carton in the confined space. This sustained, deliberate physical proximity, necessitated by the task and the tiny room, was more overwhelming than the close encounter under the desk had been. I felt the rhythm of her breathing against my back, the contact igniting a sudden, consuming heat that had nothing to do with the air temperature. The urgency of the job demanded absolute silence, but the external risks were multiplying. Just as I started running the script on the terminal, a process that took excruciatingly long, a new, sharper sound pierced the silence, the faint, rhythmic creak of an elevator cable slowing to a stop on our floor. Clara froze, dropping the box she was holding. She didn't look at me. She looked terrified. The freight elevator only runs on a direct call, she breathed, her eyes darting to the only door. Ramirez doesn't use it. That's Mr. Stern. He sometimes comes back late to check on his personal files. The thought of our boss, the very subject of our conspiracy, discovering us together in this small, hidden room, surrounded by evidence of fraud and the palpable, unprofessional closeness, sent a surge of pure adrenaline through my system. We immediately abandoned the computer. Clara pulled me deeper into the narrow aisle between the high shelves, crushing me behind a stack of tall, dusty binders. The space was so tight our bodies were molded together, my heart hammering against her spine, her frantic pulse beating against my neck. While pressed together in the suffocating dark, she silently pointed to a high shelf. The Q3 receipts are in the red binder. If Stern finds us, you must be working on that. You were sent for that, she communicated in a fierce, silent gaze. As I reached up, stabilizing myself against the metal shelf, my hand brushed against a thin, metallic object tucked haphazardly between two file folders. I pulled it out instinctively. It was a small, tarnished silver locket on a delicate chain. It looked completely out of place against the sterile corporate folders. This was the first time I saw an object that belonged unequivocally to Clara, the woman, not Clara, the secretary. It was scratched, looked old, and felt cold in my hand, a fragile, tangible sign of her hidden self and the conspiracy we were sharing. I gripped the locket, tucking it into my palm just as the footsteps, distinctly heavy and impatient, passed the door of the archive room and continued down the main corridor toward Stern's office. We didn't move for another 3 minutes. When Clara finally pulled away, she was trembling. The silver locket, the physical symbol of our extreme risk and shared secret, remained in my hand. "It's too dangerous to finish the script tonight," she whispered, taking deep, shaky breaths. "Stern is here, and he'll be watching the server log now. We almost crossed the line into prison. We have to stop." She retrieved the USB drive and tucked it deep into her jacket pocket. She looked at the locket in my palm, then back to my eyes, her gaze lingering on the sudden, intense heat between us, the emotional climax of the fear and the proximity. She took a step back, breaking the physical connection, the air instantly colder. "I can't risk the office again. Not with him here." She paused, her eyes focused on a distant, internal point. "I have access to a secure, private room downtown, a meeting space my sister owns. It's completely off the grid. Meet me there. 8 a.m. sharp, before the city wakes up. I'll text you the address." She grabbed my arm, her grip desperate and brief, then pushed me toward the door. The immediate risk was solved by the stop, but the promise of the next meeting, at a completely secret location just hours away, sealed our fate. The text arrived at 4:30 a.m., a nondescript address near the city harbor, and the instruction: "Use the service entrance, code 217. I had slept maybe 2 hours, the cold, smooth silver locket still clutched in my hand. The weight of the impending fraud, and the electrifying memory of Clara pressed against me in the archive room made sleep impossible. I knew that showing up at 8 a.m. meant permanently leaving my safe, honest life behind. The financial scandal was secondary. The secret we shared was the real, consuming danger. The meeting spot was a private, unmarked meeting loft owned by Clara's sister. It was a stylish, minimalist space with enormous windows overlooking the harbor, flooded with the cool, blue-gray light of the early morning. It felt luxurious and completely disconnected from the corporate world, yet the open space made me feel exposed. Clara was already there, pacing near the window, dressed in a simple but elegant dress that was less formal than her office wear, highlighting her genuine, non-corporate vulnerability. On a small glass table lay the USB drive, waiting. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice strained, but without the usual steel. "I was terrified you wouldn't." The air around us felt thin and volatile. We didn't waste time on small talk. We quickly worked through the rest of the override script, finally executing the fraudulent timestamping on the remote terminal. The moment the process completed, the tension didn't ease. It transformed into a shared, criminal bond. Just as I pulled the USB drive out, ready to delete the script, Clara's eyes snapped to the wide windows overlooking the street. "No," she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth, stifling a small gasp. Parked directly across the street, a black sedan with tinted windows was idling. It was the specific model that Mr. Stern used for his private, out-of-town trips. "He's not supposed to be back until noon," she whispered, her fear returning instantly. "He never comes to this area. He's either tracking me, or he got suspicious after his midnight run to the office." We both understood the consequence. If he saw us leave this private, unaffiliated space together, his suspicions would be confirmed, leading not just to firing, but to criminal charges for both of us. The fear was paralyzing. Clara immediately moved to the nearest door, a small pantry, to hide. I stopped her. "No. We can't both disappear. If he sees the loft door open, he'll know you're here. If he asks the owner, we're done." I had to act now, pay the price, and become the sole visible target. "I'll go," I announced, making the instantaneous, irreversible choice. "I'll go out the front, act confused, like I'm looking for the wrong address. If he follows me, he loses you. It gives you time to disappear." The price was risking everything, my freedom and career, for her safety. I shoved the USB drive into her hand. Clara grabbed my arm, her manicured fingers digging hard into my bicep. "Alex, no. That is too much risk. He's ruthless. You could lose everything." "I made my choice in the archive room," I said, meeting her desperate gaze. "Just go to the pantry. Don't move." I started walking toward the door. She let go of my arm, but her panic was overwhelming her control. She ran to me and wrapped her arms around my torso from behind, pulling me back with a sudden, desperate strength I hadn't expected. This was not a professional touch. This was pure, terrified reliance. "Please," she choked out, her face pressed against my back. "I need you. Don't leave me alone to face this." The words weren't about the fraud. They were the first, raw confession of her dependence and her need for my protection. The intimacy of that fragile moment, her warmth, her desperation, her vulnerability, was absolute. I broke free gently, turned, and gave her a long, hard look that acknowledged the weight of her words. "I'll see you soon," I promised, my own voice low and steady, cementing the bond. I walked to the door, my heart pounding, and pulled it open, stepping out into the line of sight of Mr. Stern's idling sedan. As I walked past a coat stand, I noticed the silver locket she'd lost in the archive room. She had hung it on a hook, intending to leave with it. I paused, snatching it up. I walked toward the elevator, putting myself directly in view of the black sedan. Stern's car lights flashed. He had seen me. I gripped the locket. It was no longer just a secret she lost. Now, it was a pledge, a fragile piece of her identity I carried into danger, a confirmation of the emotional truth shared just moments before the attempted escape. I reached the lobby. Stern's car started to move, pulling out to follow me. I had successfully drawn the predator away from his real target. I started walking quickly, limping slightly, a slight performance to make my presence look accidental, and ducked into a side alley. I needed to get back to the office to cover my tracks, but I couldn't risk going to my apartment. I needed a secure place where I could wait out the next few hours. I reached into the pocket of my jacket, and my fingers brushed against a small, rolled-up piece of paper that must have been slipped there during our embrace. I stopped under the harsh light of a street lamp and unrolled it. It wasn't an address. It was a cryptic note. "I have the originals. My place. 4 o'clock. Use the key you already have." The key card she gave me in part 1, the one that accessed the service floor. She had essentially given me the key to her life, and was inviting me into her most private space after I had risked everything for her. I crumpled the paper in my hand, the realization hitting me. I wasn't just covering her tracks. I was being drawn into her home, where the stakes were domestic, terrifying, and final. I had a ticket to the absolute climax of her life. The escape from the downtown loft was pure instinct. A panic zigzagged through the city's alleyways to lose Mr. Stern's black sedan. I spent the next 6 hours hiding out in an all-night cafe, adrenaline keeping me hyper-aware and exhausted. The consequences of my desperate action in part 3 were immediate and severe. My work phone, which I had used to coordinate the initial lie, started vibrating incessantly with urgent messages from my department head demanding to know my whereabouts after Stern's sudden return to the office. The almost exposure had immediately put me on the defensive. I knew that my career at the firm, the one I had worked relentlessly to build, was over. I couldn't risk revealing Clara's location, and I certainly couldn't afford to be honest. The price for my loyalty was due, and the first payment was my job. Around 3:30 p.m., I walked to a quiet city park and performed the necessary sacrifice. I took my corporate phone, removed the SIM card, and deliberately snapped the card in half, tossing the pieces into a public trash bin. This action sealed my commitment to Clara's secret. I had burned the bridge back to my safe, regular life, choosing the terrifying, unknown path instead. I arrived at Clara's apartment building at 3:55 p.m., using the cryptic note and the generic service floor key card she'd given me. Her building was an exclusive, high-security complex far from the city center, a place that screamed old money and immaculate discretion. I found her apartment door unlocked, just as the note implied. The interior was stunningly quiet, spacious, and warm, decorated in cool tones that hinted at wealth, but felt utterly sterile and lonely. I found Clara in the master bedroom, not panicking, but standing in the middle of the room, looking utterly drained. She had shed her corporate armor. Her heavy blazer and severe skirt lay discarded on the floor, and she was now wearing a thin, ivory silk robe that seemed too fragile for her strong frame, revealing the genuine exhaustion beneath her composure. This raw, unguarded view of her, stripped bare of her office persona, was more intimate than any close brush under a desk. She held a thick manila envelope, the originals, mentioned in her note. "They're copies of the actual Q3 transaction records," she whispered, her voice husky. "The proof Stern has been using to blackmail me for months." She finally opened up about the genuine, crushing truth of her situation. "The money wasn't for me, Alex. It was a transfer to cover a massive, illegal loan my husband took out. He signed my name to the collateral. Stern knew, and he's been forcing me to falsify records and spy for him to keep the marriage solvent and me out of prison. She ran a weary hand over her face. I'm trapped. I haven't loved my husband in 5 years, but leaving him means exposing myself to Stern's ruin. That's the real cost of my life, a prison of my own making. Her confession was heartbreaking, revealing a vulnerability and helplessness that transcended the simple power dynamic of the office. She was a woman drowning, and she had pulled me in to save her. I sat down beside her on the edge of the bed, the proximity now stemming from shared emotional trauma, the tension less sexual than deeply protective. I reached out, gently rubbing her shoulder, a gesture of pure, non-demanding support. But the moment of catharsis was violently shattered. A loud, insistent ringing began, not the doorbell, but the house alarm system. A voice boomed through the intercom in the hallway. Attention! Unauthorized access detected at the rear gate. Clara instantly froze, her eyes wide with terror. That's not Stern. That's my husband. He sets the perimeter alarm when he leaves, and he's not due back from his trip for 3 more hours. The external danger was no longer a suspicion. It was an undeniable, physical threat right outside the door, far more volatile and unpredictable than Stern. I realized with a sickening jolt that he hadn't left the house. He had only activated the alarm to trap any potential intruders, including me, in his home. We heard a rapid sequence of clicks as the main door lock engaged, followed by the sound of a heavy key turning in the handle of the master bedroom closet, located just 3 feet from us. We exchanged one long, terrified look. There was no time to run, no time to think, only the instinctive need to survive this final, absolute danger. The back door. The service stairs, I urgently whispered, grabbing her arm and pulling her off the bed. We stumbled into the hall, running silently toward the kitchen. As we neared the back entrance, Clara stopped, her fingers digging into my arm. She didn't want to run alone. We can't stop, Alex. Not now. If we give up, they both win. We need those originals. We need to use them to destroy them both. She looked at me, her resolve hardened by the immediate threat. I need one last hour, one final move, tomorrow night. The executive lounge on the 20th floor, abandoned after 10 p.m. You meet me there at 10:30. No matter what happens tonight, no matter who sees us leave. It is the only way out. The choice was clear. Sacrifice our last shred of safety for the chance to win everything. We didn't exchange another word. We slipped out the back door, leaving her home and her old life behind, committed to the final, terrifying confrontation. We spent the day in hiding, separated, communicating only through untraceable coded messages using a one-time chat app. My heart pounded every time the screen lit up, knowing every second brought us closer to the final confrontation. The consequences of the previous night were now visible. News reports hinted at an internal investigation at the firm, and my former department head left me a chilling voice message, warning me to avoid the building. The stakes were no longer just our jobs. They were potentially our freedom. I arrived at the company tower at 10:25 p.m., finding a back staircase that led me to the 20th floor. The executive lounge was located in the oldest, least used corner of the floor, a vast, carpeted space with leather chairs and a panoramic view of the silent, glittering city. It was dark, save for the weak amber glow of the emergency lights and the light pollution bleeding through the massive windows. The atmosphere was charged with a heavy, final energy, like the calm before a storm. I found Clara already there, standing in the shadows, holding the manila envelope containing the original transaction records, the key to both our freedom and our ruin. Our plan was reckless: use the originals to secure Stern's resignation, but keep our own relationship, the source of our vulnerability, absolutely secret. As we spoke, deciding our final moves, the tension mounted with terrifying speed. We were running on adrenaline and shared desperation, knowing that the building's central security system would flag our presence at any moment. The door to the lounge, which we thought was secured, suddenly shifted, opening a fraction of an inch with a faint creak against the thick carpet. In the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, stood Mr. Stern. He wasn't surprised. He was waiting. I knew you two couldn't resist a final, private meeting, he sneered, his voice cutting through the silence. The game was over. We were caught, the originals exposed in Clara's hand. I acted instantly. Shoving Clara behind a heavy leather couch, I moved to Stern, creating a physical distraction. In the ensuing struggle, short, brutal, and panicked, the manila envelope ripped. Documents scattered across the dark floor, a blizzard of corporate guilt. Stern, momentarily distracted by the loss of his evidence, was vulnerable. Clara, seizing the opportunity, rushed to a nearby server cabinet, her eyes blazing with fierce resolve. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the cabinet's heavy fire extinguisher and brought the cold, metallic base down, smashing the glass front of the terminal displaying the entire floor's active security feed. The sudden explosion of glass and the shrieking of a localized alarm were deafening. In that final, chaotic moment, the culmination wasn't about the kiss or the documents. It was the mutual destruction of the system that trapped us. We were free of the evidence, but completely exposed to the world. We fled the executive lounge as sirens began to wail in the distance. Running down the emergency stairs, our bodies moving with frantic, shared rhythm, we faced the final choice. "We can't be together, Alex," Clara gasped, leaning against the cold concrete wall 10 floors down. "Not now. Not after this. The police, the investigation, they will dissect our relationship and use it to destroy my daughter and you. We must protect the truth by maintaining the lie." Her voice was hard, professional, but her eyes pleaded for understanding. "We choose the absolute secret. We disappear from the corporate world, we testify separately about Stern's fraud, and we deny any personal connection. We save each other by severing the visible tie." I knew she was right. I was her protection, but also her ultimate liability. I nodded, accepting the painful terms of our mutual salvation. She removed the recovered, slightly dented silver locket from her neck and pressed it firmly into my hand. 3 months later, the firm was in shambles. Stern was under investigation, and Clara's testimony, supported by the fragments of evidence we recovered, protected her from legal reprisal while exposing her husband's financial ruin. I was working a basic construction job downtown, the honesty of the labor a welcome antidote to the corporate lies. I hadn't seen Clara since that night. I kept the silver locket hidden inside the lining of my work boot, its cold presence a constant, private reminder of the fire we walked through. One morning, returning to my locker, I found a small, unmarked paperback copy of the Odyssey tucked into my gym bag. I knew she'd read it during our late-night shifts. I opened it to a random page. Tucked inside was a tiny, folded $100 bill, a single, silent reward for my loyalty, and a small, typewritten note with only 4 words. "The secret is safe." I smiled, the simple proof of her continued existence and gratitude a powerful reward for the entire journey. I closed the book, the metallic scent of the locket beneath my feet grounding me. I didn't need a public life with her. The shared danger was the relationship. I turned and walked out onto the street, stepping through the newly repaired glass doors of my old firm's lobby, now walking as a free man, leaving the shattered corporate cage behind me forever.